Hello everyone and welcome back to the only series out there that combines the stories of Magic the Gathering with the physical cards you can win. I'm Simon and this is Friday Night Lore. So before I begin this week's episode, let me just say again, thank you all so much for helping this channel get to 10,000 subscribers. It's a huge achievement, and I owe it all to you out there who enjoyed my content. Remember, you can still enter to win an entire box of Dragon of Tarkir as a part of this huge milestone. Check out all the details in my previous video here. Speaking of Tarkir, let's continue looking at some of our favorite characters from this plane. For this week's FNL, let's examine how the Khan of the Abzan, Anafenza, went from Chief of the Desert to a spirit bound to the world through her clan's traditional use of kin trees. In the original timeline of Tarkir, Anafenza was the strikingly eager while still very young Khan of the Abzan. Before being voted to the Khanship by the combined houses which made up the Abzan society, Anafenza was the High General of the Abzan army. As a young child, when she was about 13 years old, Anafenza was nothing more than the daughter of a wealthy family of traders on the Salt Road. Life on the caravans were difficult and trying to be sure, but she always found comfort in cutting her hair. She enjoyed the short look, but more so, she hated the feeling of sand being caught in her longer hair. Her family was extended, and all played their role in the trade business. Many members of her house were also soldiers and warriors in the Abzan army. She also had an orc cousin, named Var. Orcs entered into the Abzan only if their family had been killed in a conflict with their clan. If no living members were willing to take in the young, an Abzan family would adopt them. Anafenza had a great distaste for this cousin, who was adopted when one of her uncles killed his family during a battle against the Mardu. While they were seen as cousins by Abzan society, she could never see him as family, for the same battle also took the lives of a number of her relatives. While on the Salt Road collecting goods to trade, her family's caravan was ambushed. They first noticed the tusks of a mastodon, then another, and then another, and then they smelt an odor of death and decay being drifted by the winds. These were reanimated corpses of mastodons attacking the caravan. That only meant one thing: the Sultai were to blame. Between the great dead beasts rose a number of Sultai soldiers who appeared to have just sprung from the sands. Immediately the Abzan warriors of the caravan gathered to defend their family and clan, but they seemed useless against the shambling mastodons. That's when Anafenza's kin tree heeded their family's call. 3 spirits emerged and formed soldiers from pure sand. Taking their otherworldly weapons to the rotten flesh of the beasts, they cut them down in short order. One of the mastodons managed to push against the giant caravan citadel, knocking it to its side. Anafenza watched as her kin tree was uprooted by the force of this blow, and as it landed, it splintered. Fear overtook the young girl, as she grabbed the sword from one of the fallen and began searching for her parents. She found nothing but death and chaos until she heard the voice of her adopted orc cousin. He told her that her family had died, along with his Bond family. They had been betrayed, and they had to escape while they still had time. Anafenza really wanted nothing to do with her cousin, but she was stopped when an arrow found its way into the shoulder of the orc. Bound by her family, she decided to help her Bond cousin, and together they escaped, barely missing more arrows as they were fired. As they traveled to find civilization and help, her and Var bonded for the first time. She knew her family had been wiped out, but she felt like she still had some family in Var. This nice reunion together didn't last though, as Var noticed that they had been followed. He told Anafenza to hide in a tree as the pursuers attacked him. He ran past them, and Anafenza noticed that the attackers were in fact wearing Abzan armor. This angered Anafenza beyond reason. She grabbed her sword and dropped down on one of the men, plunging her blade deep into his belly and killing him. The other assailant turned and charged the young girl, but Var grabbed him by the neck and pinned him to the ground. She began to interrogate the man, threatening him with a pain worse than death. Eventually the man broke and said that it was a member of her family that had hired the Sultai to attack the caravan. This wasn't enough, however. She needed a name, and the man mustered to say Oret. Oret had been her favorite cousin, one she trusted with her own life, and previously preferred over her adopted kin. The news was grim, but nothing could be done. There was no sign of Oret. He had disappeared, and would go into hiding for many years after his betrayal. Taking the seat of the Khan, which for the Abzan was made of pure amber at the base of the giant first tree, She ruled with a sense of justice. The first tree was said to be the first kin tree of the Abzan, housing the early spirits of their ancestors and former Khans. Her early history as Khan was met with little excitement, spending most of her time climbing the kin tree with a very childlike glee. The first time she ever truly felt like a Khan is when she called her initial meeting of the Abzan house leaders. She demanded that every leader of the houses make this meeting so that they could swear loyalty to their new Khan either through blood or bond. She would accept anyone who offered their house to her cause, and she expected every house to make an appearance. It was all part of her plan. Her cousin, the betrayer Oret, appeared in the Khan's Great Hall. He had no clue that Anafenza knew of his actions, and claimed that he was leading forces against the Mardu during his absence. Of course, Anafenza knew this was a lie, and that he had only just appeared to gain some security through his kin's new position. Anafenza gestured to her cousin, Var, to come over to Oret, and with one huge hand, he forced the man to one knee. She pulled out her blade and put it to the bleeding man's neck. Oret claimed that he was the last of her family, and that she couldn't just kill off the last of her kin like this. She looked past Oret to her Orc cousin and proclaimed that he was no longer family to her, and that she still had true family remaining. She cut the side of the man's face, and then cut her own hand, letting the combined blood drip into a fire. She announced that Oret was forever banished from her family, and that his spirit would never take root as an Abzan. Anafenza had discovered the meaning of family. This lesson would go on to govern how she would lead her clan in the future. She treated every member of her clan as family, and the Abzan were truly connected. This life of family and glorious rise to power would not be the final story of Anafenza, however. Thanks to the events of Fate Reforged, the dragons on Tarkir lived on, and thus, history had changed forever, along with Anafenza's fate. With the Dragon Lord Dromoka taking control of the shifting wastes and holding dominion over the people who used to call themselves Abzan, there was no room in this timeline for those who carried the title of Khan. Since Anafenza was born into this new world, she followed the dragon's commands and customs like all others in her clan. One such custom, which was implemented by the Dragon Lord, was the abolishment of necromancy by the former Abzan people. What Dromoka saw as the disgusting practice of necromancy, the former Abzan saw as a tradition to honor their ancestors through their spirits. Even as Dromoka gained control over the Abzan, there were still splinter groups who broke affiliation with their clan in order to keep planting their kin trees. Over the years, these groups would be hunted down and all but eliminated. By the time Anafenza made it to the rank of general in the Dromokan army, the mere whispers of kin trees could have someone executed, let alone its forbidden practice. Many under her command only traded stories of the spirits in jest or as a type of ghost story, meant to instill fear of the practice, warning any of the consequences of its use. In this timeline, her traitor cousin, Oret, became one of her most trusted and highly ranked warriors. And since the great battle between the Abzan and Mardu had never occurred, her bond cousin, Var, was never known to Anafenza. Var became a leading rider in the army of the Dragon Lord Kolaghan, destined to see his former family member forever as an enemy. One day, as Anafenza and Oret were patrolling the citadel at which they were stationed, they became besieged. Flashes of crackling lightning broke the sky, bringing with them the appearance of 4 winged dragons dancing in the dense air. This was the trademark shock and destroy tactic of the Dragon Lord Kolaghan and his followers. The citadel was lost. It was plain to see to Anafenza. She grabbed her cousin and some of her famous ibex goats and rode from the lost city. As they made their way from the destruction, they noticed that they had been followed by a band of Kolaghan riders, led by none other than the Orc Var. They made their way to an open canyon. Anafenza obviously had a plan, while Oret just hoped to lose the riders. They looked up to see their Scale Lord, the dragon general who worked directly under Dromoka to organize the lesser human followers, as it was in conflict with a large dragon from Kolaghan's brood. As the lightning drake got away from its Dromokan captor, Oret noticed that the army following them had made great pace towards them. Anafenza led Oret and the pursuing force deep into the canyon, until they reached the dead end. Oret believed them to be trapped. Anafenza of course knew differently, because she had been to this spot many times in the past, always in secret. She tied her ibex goats to a tree. The tree was dried and pathetic looking, but still alive. Around its trunk were names and hundreds of amber bowls. Oret knew the scene and immediately asked for the pair to leave. he rather would die than be in the presence of an accursed kin tree. His general assured him that she had been here before, and that she had communed with the spirits. She knew it was a sin, but she had learned so much from her ancestors. The spirits of the past were not malicious ghosts who should be feared, but rather their only goal was to protect their descendants and protect their clan. It was everything their society had been built on, and Anafenza could not understand why such a practice was forbidden by the Dragon Lord. Anafenza made the choice to show Aurette the power of the spirits, and their true purpose. She called forth the ancestors to protect their kin, and with a gust of wind, the sand began to dance around the trapped warriors. The enemy army stood in disbelief to the scene before them. In that moment, the spirits entered Anafenza's body through the sand she was inhaling with each breath. In a flash of steel and sand, the spirits assisted Anafenza, and she dispatched the riders with deadly efficiency. Aurette seemed to be the most stunned by this, seeing Anafenza remove the head of the orc leader, Var. But the fight wasn't over. Legions of dragons appeared in the sky with lightning and thunder accompanying them. Anafenza and the spirits did not falter. She bowed her head and steadied her stance. With a whisper, a ray of light brighter than the sun exploded from her body. The beam struck one of Kolaghan's dragons and ripped it to shreds while it flew. That devastation was enough to send the lesser dragons flying back to their own lands. The spirits left Anafenza's body, and as she regained her strength, their Scalelord appeared before them. With its great weight, it landed and utterly destroyed the kin tree she had just used. The dragon would not dare speak their human language, but its actions spoke to them like words. It nodded towards Anafenza and began charging incredible heat from its mouth. Anafenza knew it was her time. She had broken the law of Dromoka, and thus she deserved this death. Aurette did not share the same view, however. He got between her and the dragon and begged for a moment. He asked that the dragon grant him one request. Anafenza had broken the law, and she deserved to be punished, but he asked if he could execute his general himself. The dragon seemed to agree, nodding towards Aurette and stopping his attack. Aurette took a hold of Anafenza's prized two-handed blade and lifted it over her head. Before he dealt the fatal blow, he whispered, "This is not the end for you, my kin." With one swing, Anafenza fell dead. For his dedication to Dromoka, Aurette was promoted. With his new position, he was granted access to rarely seen maps which located known kin trees in the area which had yet to be destroyed. After some time, he went back to the canyon where he had killed Anafenza. There, no sign of her body remained, but the amber vessels of the lost tree still lingered. He grabbed every single amber container he could. Anafenza had told him that these were used to store the spirits themselves. He took them to the farthest and most isolated tree he could find. He had no idea if what he was doing was correct or if it would even work. He placed the amber around the tree and wrote Anafenza's name into its trunk. He stood for a moment to see if anything would happen. He was disappointed with the tree's silence and rode off. It wasn't until the rumors started to fly through the camps of Dromoka that he knew he had succeeded. The men would tell stories of Sand protecting them in battle and crushing the enemy before any harm came to them. They spoke of a figure in the sands, a warrior, a woman, a guardian. Aurette knew this was Anafenza. The spirit of Anafenza was protecting her people just as she had always done in life. Now, with her great acts of protection, even the armies of Dromoka began to think of the spirits in a different light. This necromancy, as they called it, began to feel like something different. It began to feel like their kin. So, there you go guys, the story behind how Anafenza the Foremost went from being the Khan of the Abzan to the kin tree guardian of her people. Now, it's time for you to enter for your chance to win the prior, a copy of Anafenza the Foremost. Remember, to enter, all you have to do is subscribe to this channel and comment on this video. At the end of the week, I'll use a random number generator to choose a winner from the comments, and announce the winner at the end of next week's Friday Night Lore episode, so stay tuned to see if you've won. Now, let's move on and announce the winner of last week's FNL. If you recall, last week's episode was on the Dragon Lord Dromoka, and thus, I'm giving away this Dromoka the Eternal card. So the winner of last week's FNL giveaway and new owner of this Dromoka the Eternal card is Nazgul Gaming. Congratulations to the YouTube user named Nazgul Gaming. Please, if you could, check your private messages for a message from me. There you'll find all the info I need to send you this card. If you don't see it in your private messages, check your spam, for it may have been sent there. I hope you all enjoyed this week's episode of Friday Night Lore. I want you all to know that I really appreciate every single comment you guys post on these videos. To answer an occurring question, the reason I give away some cards over others is because I simply don't own them. I'm not affiliated with any stores or manufacturers, so these cards are coming out of my own personal collection. So I apologize if I can't give away your preferred card, but I can only give away what I own. In any case, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, share, and sub to the channel. It all helps a lot when it comes to making new content. As always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.